For our next session, we're going to tackle another state action around expanding access to advanced courses and doing so at the earliest possible time. We'll also be discussing enrollment and automatic pathways, automatic enrollment policies related to math pathways, We know that evidence shows that in order for students to reach their highest potential, especially when it comes to academic outcomes as well as post-secondary outcomes, there's one fundamental course that they need, Algebra 1. And we know that the soonest that we can get students access to algebra, the greater likelihood it is that they'll experience success on their academic journey, as well as getting into college, as well as entering the workforce and experiencing productivity there. Perhaps more than ever, we know that all students do need access, has been a common refrain from our time together, to advanced coursework and even Algebra 1 and grade level coursework at the earliest possible onsets. I'm pleased for our next discussion to introduce our next set of speakers. We have Chris Reykdal, the Superintendent of Public Instruction from Washington State. We have Richard Woods, the Superintendent of State School Superintendent from the state of Georgia, and Lindsey Henderson, who you heard from earlier, the Policy Director of Mathematics for ExcelinEd. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Well, I have to say I was really nervous for this panel because I have watched both of you in the work in your states and just with a ton of admiration for all that you've done. I'm really excited to be here to engage in this conversation about two policies that I think are really important: automatic enrollment in advanced math and pathways, and also the intersection of those two policies because they build off of each other. We've seen nationally that automatic enrollment in advanced math policies take off in at least 9 states since like January. Virginia, over the weekend, Governor Youngkin just signed their automatic enrollment in advanced math bill, and they're requiring districts to create their own policies to get kids in advanced math for that Algebra 1 class that's so critical by 8th grade for students who are mathematically ready. That's what the evidence and research shows, is that students need to be ready for Algebra 1 in order to be successful in it. And I just think I'm just so excited to talk about the intersection of pathways and automatic enrollment. So Superintendent Reykdal, could you kick us off and talk a little bit about your efforts towards automatic enrollment and what that meant for your state?
Great. Yeah, again, Chris Reykdal, Superintendent of Public Schools in the state of Washington. Full disclosure, Sydney Dixon took my pink jacket earlier, so if you see her, I need that back if you see her. So our state, like many others, passed legislation around this. It was in 2019. It became effective in 2021. Not a great time to pass a new policy. The year pandemic starts and then the depths of the pandemic. But I will say it was part of the larger research framework that a lot of you are a part of here. It is entirely about, at the secondary level, automatically sort of telling students, when you've achieved some success, you've met benchmark, we're going to put you in the next most rigorous course to try to elevate and push more kids in mathematics. Now, if that's all we did, I would say it's great, and we already see that to fruition in a lot of ways, including, by the way, lots more kids taking more math, 3rd and 4th credit of math, more of them getting past Algebra 2, and then we've designed a whole bunch of CTE courses that are math equivalent. So we're building all the time current tech ed courses that are incorporating Algebra 1, geometry, Algebra 2 stuff. So good on the high school side, but if you're like my state, your legislature spends a ton of time on the high school system. It's like the world begins in 9th grade and they all want to play with your grad requirements and your test requirements, but as educational leaders, we know we got to go much earlier. So I will say, to complement that policy of acceleration, ours is a state that has also created a legal expectation that will go beyond a simple test in, say, 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade to put students in high-cap programs or acceleration programs in elementary school. So leave it to the blue state guy, the only one up here today, to say, this is why we shouldn't make ugly, awful blanket statements around things like DEI. Inclusion is a powerful word, and when you accelerate kids in earlier grades, you're not remediating them or panicking to force kids into Algebra 1 in 8th grade. They're automatically building that way. So This is the substance of the work, I think, which is think about those acceleration policies at the high school level, but design backwards on getting kids into their high cap and acceleration programs in elementary. And if I can top it off, I will say right around that time or just before that time, we also said, let's go all the way to pre-K and think about the number of kids who really need a high-quality preschool experience, where most of our Head Start and our ECAP and our early learning programs are focused on kids in such financial distress, which is great, but there's a window of students whose families can't really afford the high quality, but they certainly don't qualify for the rest of it. So we started this thing called Transition Kindergarten. We've got a ton more kids now getting access to even a semester a year as 4-year-olds, because we identified them and said, if they don't get a little extra help now, we will be remediating them later on. Even as 5- and 6-year-olds, they'll be behind the curve. So my message is holistic. Don't just let your legislatures pick a policy framework around high school. Have a concept for late elementary, middle. Have a concept for early learning even on how to accelerate kids.
I love that systems approach. I think it's so important to tackle all aspects of the pipeline, and I think that's really smart. We've seen automatic enrollment in advanced math. Why is that such a tongue twister? I can't decide. Okay, we've seen them take off in all sorts of states, red, purple, blue states, and it seems to be unanimous across the board. It's I call it the no-brainer policy set. North Carolina, Texas, Washington, we often talk about those 3 states in particular and how important it is to give all kids access to these advanced math opportunities. Really appreciate your thoughts there. Superintendent Woods, would you take us on a journey about the intersection of automatic enrollment and your work with pathways, and specifically those career-ready credentials that you have?
Well, I think, for us, we really view every kid as a CTA kid. Just because of the first word, you're going to have a career. And I think it is trying to push that and recognize that whether it's in enrollment, enlistment, employment, then those are areas that we want to make sure our kids have access to. Definitely for us, I think it's been a unique approach that even today we have at the high school level what we call our CTA Plus courses. And so now with a pathway, especially right for our 4th year, you can get dual credit in English language arts, math, science in a pathway. And so you complete the pathway, you get the credit there. So, that begins to free up more additional time. But, for us, it really allows our students to see that relevance piece, put the how and the why together. And, and especially at high school, you're really trying to, hook those kids in. And they're beginning to really question, why do I have to learn X? But I think putting those connections out there. But for, students as well, it's good to start early. So we see an infusion of maybe like our ag classes, some of our skills classes, our CTA classes, beginning even in elementary school, and giving them exposure. And many of our kids, they don't know what they don't know, so allowing them to participate in that. When we look at pathway creation, we are heavily invested in making sure that business and industry is engaged with us, so that they have the appropriate math. What does a kid need? What does your future workforce need, so that we can give them that experience. Looking at internships, going beyond the school days. So, I'm excited about that. STEM and STEAM education, for us, and of course incorporates a lot of math, but, once again, we're integrating, and I really like the integration approach.
Such a great answer as well. I love kids don't know what they don't know, and really giving them exposure and experience and opportunity is so important. One thing we often hear, especially when that automatic enrollment in advanced math policy is mentioned, kind of a knee-jerk reaction is, could these kind of policies be widening gaps as opposed to closing them? And I would love your take about what you've seen in your states as you've approached automatic enrollment in advanced math. Talk about that in relationship to gaps.
Yeah, I'll say again, using multiple measures in elementary school to think about kids accelerating is key. If you just use a singular test, you're going to leave a lot of students out. It's not an equitable opportunity. Nor is saying to every kid, hey, our policy is no matter how you did from K to 7, we're sticking every kid in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. The research is pretty clear. That really does cause some damage. So it is about a preparatory concept much earlier and an acceleration concept much earlier. And then, I think honoring the fact that we can all be math people. We are all math people. We're not all going to have careers that need us to get to calculus. And so in a state like ours, you know, we're, I don't know, top half of the nation in math, and the black-white gap is there's only one state I think better than us now. It's also about saying to kids by the time you're in Algebra 2, for example, let's customize that Algebra 2 course so that you start to figure out if I'm headed to a university, that better be leading you to calculus and some pretty traditional mathematic concepts. If you're headed to the trades, as they're doing in Georgia, in our state, let's tailor the second semester of Algebra 2 to be really hands-on so that it's building you towards your career pathway, whether that's an associate degree, a technical degree, military service, or apprenticeship. So it is about acceleration early so you don't have these forced policies, but it's also about opening up math later on. When we get a pretty honest assessment about what kids' interests are, it can't be university for all, or you get perverse policies that force kids into that path, and then you've created a bigger dissonance, and then you've really burnt kids out on the possibility of math being something they need for life.
I just want to echo what you said about leveraging student interests and family interests. Aspirations are also really important, making sure that families can make informed decisions, right, about the pathway. I think that's so strong. Superintendent Woods, could you tell us about your approach to kind of support multiple on-ramps to opportunity, particularly as it relates to the CTE pathways that you were talking about?
Well, you know, it definitely begins with the foundation piece. We just revamped our math standards, so it's been a 2-year rollout for us. And, you know, for all kids, I mean, we want to open up as many doors as we possibly can. So I think, you know, that K-5 piece or pre-K-5 piece is extremely important. At building that, I think one of the things we do as well is that, you know, working with our partner DRC, who actually does our milestones testing as well, you know, we have a screener that is aligned with our standards. And I think that, you know, looking at the tightness of our standards, working with, you know, partners such as DRC, we're able to look at gaps analysis. And I think that's, you know, what we're trying to do as kids progress is that, you know, let's fill in those gaps that are missing. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, those are wide, sometimes they're small. So it gives us flexibility as teachers and educators to make those changes. You know, and I think, you know, for our kids right now, many of them now have the opportunity to take algebra, you know, or, you know, Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And as was stated earlier, you know, providing them access when they are ready is very, very critical, because now these kids who are taking that, this opens up a door of avenue that you can now take our advanced math pathway. So, you know, things such as pre-cal, you know, trig, these are other courses that are out there, you know, expands more opportunities for our kids. So, you know, we're definitely looking at that. You know, one of the things we look at is just, you know, with AP, you know, classes. Another way in which we have, you know, kind of led the way a little bit with AP pre-cal. So, you know, what can we do to, you know, use our time that we've allotted for those kids that are ready? Let's don't hold them back, but let's push them forward, and you know, and allowing our teachers to access so that, again, we can move them and fill in those gaps so we increase those opportunities for you know, taking that advanced math, or, you know, being able to diversify a little bit.
Oh, this conversation just gets me so excited. We're going to end our panel discussion here with one piece of advice for other states that are interested in providing opportunity either through pathways or through advanced math. Let's start with you, Superintendent Reykdal.
Yeah, so maybe just to build a little bit on Superintendent Woods. Also think about the equity continuum. So you've pushed kids, you've gotten kids access to early critical learning, you've accelerated them faster through more equitable policies besides a standard test as a 4th grader. You've given them opportunities in 8th grade to take algebra, you've accelerated them, you've customized the learning by Algebra 2. They now want college credit, and because of the disproportionality in our country for access to that due to resources, don't just rely on AP, even for the states that are paying for that out of pocket for the tests. We have a big Running Start program, as many of you do, but mostly those kids have the affordability to leave high school and go to a college campus. So we've really ramped up college in the high school, gotten rid of all the fees on that. So it's another equitable way to say to kids, don't stop your advanced math course taking, go get that college credit while you're here, but you've got to remove the barriers to equity to that. So again, my message is a continuum. Don't think about this as a high school problem. This is a pre-K problem or challenge or opportunity. And then Don't be shy about the fact that some student populations need more support than others. That's what inclusion looks like. That's what equity looks like, and we should never shy away from that.
I love that. Superintendent Woods, piece of advice?
I'd invest in your teachers. At the end of the day, that's the people who are going to make the biggest impact. I think every teacher has the ability to have a life-changing impact on each and every student they teach. Provide them the resources, provide them the training. They have to feel comfortable, in the content before they can deliver the content with confidence. And that's, extremely important. As for teachers, what I share with them is that, build those relationships first. The old adage is, from Maxwell, they don't care how much you know until they first know how much you care. Relationships do matter. Have fun. And there's nothing wrong for us in education just to have a good time in class. I think, because I think all of us, we don't want to go to a restaurant or keep going back to a restaurant that really sucks, okay? That's, you don't do that. And so you want those kids, a good teacher means, that they're saying, Mom, Dad, take me to school, because of that person, because they can have that impact. And, and I think, make it relevant, make it real. Because at the end of the day, if we cannot make that connection that they can see the why, they're going to be daydreaming about something else in your class, and it's not going to be math. So invest in those teachers.
Oh, I couldn't have asked for a better answer to end this panel with. Thank you so much for your time, and we just wish you, everybody in the audience, a wonderful rest of the conference.
Thank you once again to Superintendent Reykdal, Superintendent Woods, and Lindsey Henderson. I think from the conversation, we know that the timing of students' placement is fundamental in setting them up for success, both for college and career. There's one nugget from the panel that really stuck out with me, and that's as the panelists were discussing exposing students to rigorous courses at the earliest possible onset, and I think the terms were used preparation and acceleration. And I think sometimes we're so guilty in our desire to, and guilty is not the right word, we're so zealous in our desire to advance outcomes that we heavily focus on acceleration, but preparation is obviously fundamental. And so thank you, panelists, for that. We're going to transition. Speaking of workforce connections, we have another spotlight on aligned research. This time, the spotlight is coming to you from the National Math and Science Initiative. And the speaker will be talking about how to create a STEM identity in middle school students. Please help me welcome Jeremy Anderson, the CEO of the National Science and Math Initiative, who will tell us about creating a strong pipeline into STEM. Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's an honor to be here, and I've got a really short time, so I'm going to talk fast, and I'm going to throw a lot of data at you. And I think it's really important that we think about what do we want to accomplish here. I want to be able to talk about task number 5 in CCSSO's great report on a nation of problem solvers, that we need to increase early access to advanced mathematics. And I also want to talk about the importance that without high-quality, world-class STEM teacher professional development, we may not be able to turn that corner. And to make it fun, I want to do the entire presentation as we look at this through the lens of the exploding STEM economy here in America. When we look at the impact teachers have on our students, we know that teachers have 2 to 3 times the impact of any other factor in a student's K-12 outcome. We also know that 60% of teachers really don't feel that their professional development is meaningful. Was I a teacher? No, I was in politics. I've been doing state and federal work my entire career. But my mom was a teacher. My dad was a teacher. Combined, they have 65 years in the classroom. My wife of 25 years has been in the classroom for 15 years. And one of our daughters, she just started her first year as a middle school teacher in a Midwestern state. Thank you. The important thing here is that we have to have a way to really help these math teachers understand how to make these children's experiences real world and hands-on, because the economy is changing faster than we know. We know that STEM jobs are going to increase at 3.5 times the rate of any other industry in America over the next 10 years. The average job that's not STEM will increase by less than 2%. If you're in a science and engineering career, you're going to be increasing by over 10%. And this is the trend that we see moving for all opportunities for these students to succeed. This is a map I look at once, twice, okay, probably 10 times a day in meetings I'm having with districts and with corporations. This is not a map of where STEM is proliferant in the United States. This is a map of new STEM facilities that are supposed to be built between now and 2030. The black dots are semiconductor facilities. That's in your phone, it's in your car, it's in your home. The orange dots are electric vehicle batteries. The green dots are new electric vehicle automobile production facilities. There's solar, there's nuclear, and all of these have all been announced and are in the process of being built right now. And the problem we have is that when you look at the forecast for these STEM jobs, we're not going to be on track as a nation if we don't make math a priority. When you look at just the numbers for the semiconductor industry, and this is a report they released last fall, they anticipate in those 19 factories that they are going to produce 114,000 new jobs. And with K-12 and post-secondary, we're on track right now to barely fill 60% of those jobs. Nationwide by 2030, we will have 1.4 million STEM jobs that are unfilled if we don't help these students turn the corner. And it's a great opportunity for them to grow. The other thing you've got to remember is using a little math. I like demographics. Some of you remember the dot-com bust in 2007. Well, not only did people have financial difficulties, but believe it or not, we had a lot less babies born over a 6-year period. From 2008 to 2013, the number of live births went down significantly. Those 2008 born babies are juniors in high school. So next year, they're a senior. So even if you do amazing work in your states and in your districts and you increase graduation rates, we will be graduating less people at a time when we need more STEM jobs. And that's a great opportunity for those students. When we look at what matters, a lot of these corporations talk about going to community colleges, post-secondary, talking to high school students. It actually happens so much earlier. The research shows that STEM identities are actually formed in many cases before you get to middle school. And when we look at some of the research across the country on this, we know that like Gen Z, 79% of them said they think STEM would be fun to go into, but less than 29% of them actually aspire for a STEM career. We know that with young women, it's not even middle school when they turn. It's as they're entering middle school that the number of young women who want to go into a STEM career drops precipitously. And intentionally preparing our educators, it matters. Back talking about my daughter, who's a first-year teacher, I've had conversations with her. I've asked her as a 5th grade teacher, have you been trained in vertical alignment? Do you understand what your students need to master by 6th grade or by 7th grade to be ready to take algebra in 8th grade? And unfortunately, her answer was no. And it's something she aspires for now. But this is what we need to do to help those teachers understand how to make this real world for all of these students to have higher outcomes. We did a study with the Department of Defense, and there's a lot of professional development providers out there. This is a study we did with the DoD STEM office just on middle school training that we provided. But we trained 150 teachers, and over 3 different years, 3 different cohorts, the impact of those teachers hit 11,000 students. And across that training, the study came back from the independent researcher that 1, STEM confidence increased exponentially with all of those students. The second is that they started to understand algebraic reasoning. Again, these are middle schoolers, not high schoolers. But the most important part is that we saw increased academic achievement for all students, but even higher increases for those students who are in your achievement gap, where you're focused as a state leader. You're probably saying to me, really good, Jeremy, makes sense, but you don't understand my budget. My state's more local control. You don't understand how we're going to fund all of this. I would tell you that there are Fortune 500 companies that are already paying for this kind of teacher professional development. And if you look at my map where all the growth is happening in these STEM facilities, you ought to be building a partnership with some of those companies because they know right now they can't fill the jobs that they need for that position. I talked with the Panasonic EV battery plant being built 20 miles from my daughter's school. And they have 1,000 jobs filled. They have 3,000 more to fill. And they're concerned about 5 years out not having a K-12 pipeline that can keep that plant that they built for 30 years still running. We've had investments from Texas Instruments for over 20 years in the PD work that we do in Texas. General Motors is funding work that we're doing in Michigan, in Texas, and in Georgia. Department of Defense has done a lot of work with a lot of nonprofits who do this training because they're looking at workforce changes not just for the military, but for academia and for private sector. And I think it's really important when you think about the outcomes. For us, the outcome that we look at is, are we preparing these students for these STEM careers, which can be life-changing and put them in a really good financial advantage? Of those positions for the semiconductor facility, those 114,000, 40% of them are a high school degree and one credential. So if you went to a community college and got the credential, you could be starting at age 19 or 20 with a $65,000 job in a guaranteed industry that you can succeed in. And all of this matters on how the teacher professional development is actually given when you're in 3rd or 4th grade. We look at the national average, 18% of our high school graduates actually go into a STEM career. If you have high quality, world-class teacher professional development for your math and science teachers, it's 35% of those high school graduates go into a STEM career. And that's the pipeline that we need to build to change the economy for many of these communities. 2 quick case studies I just want to throw out. One is in Dallas. Texas Instruments has been funding in Dallas and around the Texas area for almost 20 years. But they funded us for the first time last year in Dallas. We trained 187 teachers. And the important impact was that we were able to increase the number of students who enrolled in AP, but we had a 46% increase in the number of AP exams taken because of the training that we were able to work with them on. And most importantly, there were 1,000 additional AP college qualifying scores for 1 year. That's 3,000 college credit hours that increased for the 7th largest school district in America. When we look at that from a big district, okay, we went in and worked with one. You can do that with your smaller districts too, and I want to commend Richard Woods in Georgia for the work his team has done. Because the second case study is more a state level one. General Motors wanted to do some investment work in workforce in Georgia. I kind of assumed we'd be working in a big metropolitan area. But we actually went and met with Richard. We met with his team. They were really helpful, and they said, we actually have rural communities that have STEM facilities being built, and we don't have the workforce to fill those jobs. And so we actually met in a rural area of Georgia 2 months ago. We met with 17 school district superintendents, and we're doing a 4-day training in June just for those districts. And we're doing it with the Chamber of Commerce in the area because they're interested in figuring out how do we partner longer term. I say all of this because this isn't just about math scores we're worried about. This is about building the future economy for the students who can succeed in this area, and every student can succeed in this area. And if we are going to look at HQIM and assessments and meaningful state policies and access to classes, we have to. But if we want to get the outcomes, we're going to have to keep remembering that we actually have to make sure we're giving the teachers the training that they need to be able to succeed and help us get to the end of this journey. Together, we actually have the ability to power the STEM workforce, and it starts through STEM professional development. And it'll be a fun opportunity if you keep looking at that map in your state, and I can give you where they are in your states. Look at those companies that are going to be building and think about what kind of a partnership you should be building with them for the future economy. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Jeremy. Really interesting to help us understand exactly the role of a career path and how that can help prepare students to fill the jobs that are in their context.